Good morning and welcome to Money Talks, the place where money meets politics. I'm your host today, Glenn Wiggle. With that, I'll introduce our guest, Ron Reinstein, today. Ron, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
We're going to talk a bit about retirement planning today. I know you are also our certified divorce financial analyst. I know it's a mouthful, but obviously, you know, you can only talk so much about divorce, and I want to talk something a little different today. Let's start with retirement, about when to retire. You know, lots of folks are up in the air about, do I retire at 55, 60, 65? Is there a right number or age?
The right number or age is really going to be predicated on what their expenses are going to be, but you also have to identify too is when you take your cash flow source from your job and now that stops, what's kicking in next? Is it Social Security? Is it a pension? But also if it's, you know, a combination of both, but maybe it's your retirement assets, your 401k, IRAs, a Roth IRA. So if you start taking income, and especially if it's at an earlier age, now the life expectancy factor really comes into play. That money has to last for, you know, maybe up to 30, 40 years. What
about Social Security? I mean, is a rule of thumb 62? I know we have some experts in the office that can help people as well. But in your opinion, from the way you see things, is there a magical number you should start taking Social Security?
There's pros and cons, whatever age you take it at. I mean, some people will say 62 because you don't know if you're going to live to 65, so you want to get some of that money. But if you're still working, taking it at 62 is just not an efficient way to go about it, because if you make too much, they're going to tax it yet again. I'm more to this side of deferring it as long as possible. You get the 8% delayed earning credits. The other thing, too, that I talk about with people that I sit with when they come into the office is that it's a source of revenue that can get taxed when you start taking money out of it too soon. So there's a higher percentage of that that's going to get taxed.
Right, very true. As far as where to live, that's a big question a lot of our clients have, is they'll say, okay, Glenn, I'm going to retire next year or 2 years or 3 years. I'm thinking about maybe staying in the state of New York, but I'm also thinking about maybe moving somewhere down south. Maybe it's for taxes, maybe it's for climate. What kind of advice do you typically give clients when it comes to where to live in retirement?
Well, I'd say with people where they want to live in retirement, you're going to want to look at where's going to get you the most bang for your buck. So in this area, yes, I understand that sometimes a liberal argument is you get a lot of money for, you know, your property by it's not that expensive. But when you have an $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 tax bill, well, when you go to sell it, I mean, you're not getting as much money out of it. So I just look at it this way: is what's going to be the most efficiency tax-wise, in terms of property tax, in terms of income tax. The federal government's always going to tax us no matter where we live, so it doesn't really avoid, you know, going anywhere else. But you want to make sure that you're going to get the most money coming in. I don't want to be paying money for schools that, you know, my kids are long past.
Right. And there's a lot of different expenses, different states. So some states will make it up by, you know, adding a registration tax to your car. Other states have higher expenses when it comes to water or utilities or things like that, right?
Yeah.
So you got to kind of weigh all those different factors when it comes to retirement planning and what your expenses are going to be. Part of our homework is always expenses is part of it. Now, that's just only part of it. We have you know, the risk tolerance and those types of things, but the expenses are always the key. And we always say, listen, when you retirement is not rocket science. It's simply someday you want to stop going to work, but be able to still pay your bills. And obviously knowing your expenses is a key part of that.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to take a very short break here, folks. Hello and welcome back to Money Talks here on WGRZ Channel 2. We were just talking with Ron Reinstein in studio here with us today. He's our certified divorce financial analyst at the office, but today we're actually talking about some retirement planning as opposed to divorce planning.
A little bit more positive.
A little more positive, right? When we left off, we were just talking about where to live, and obviously this state has, you know, really high taxes, really high expenses. But has some benefits too, right? There are some benefits of being here. We've got a great school district if your kids are in school, but of course, as you mentioned, when you retire, maybe you don't want to pay those high property taxes anymore for those high school taxes.
You got it.
Lots of folks moving to Tennessee, Florida, other places.
Just tax-free states in general.
Tax-free states in general is typically where they go. Let's talk about and switch gears a little bit and talk about the working part of it, because a question that a lot of clients will have is they'll say, you know, I'm retiring now, but I still want to work a little bit. Is that something you recommend for folks, or you say make a clean break and
absolutely
just, sail off into the sunset?
If working, I mean, it's twofold. That if you get some additional cash flow coming in for retirement, this is a great way to do it. And a lot of times some people say, I'm not working another day past the last day I get my paycheck at 65. But then I say, well, what's next? And the answer is, I don't know. I mean, you want to travel, you want to do this, you want to see family. That's good for 6 months to a year, but then after that, what's the next transition part to keep you busy? So, I mean, I think from a mental perspective too, it keeps you sharp. You're still out there and you're just doing something. Even if it's 10 hours a week, it's not a bad thing either.
I would say purposeful living. Right?
Yes.
So purposeful living, I think, makes a big difference. If you are still, if you have some sort of a purpose to what you're doing, it could be simply working on your golf game. That could be okay.
Yeah, if you want to go golf 5 days a week
fine.
and you can do it financially, by all means, go for it. But that's the other thing too is just it's staying active, and if it's a couple extra dollars with cash flow, that's a retirement in itself. Is where's the cash flow coming from?
Right.
Social Security, you may get a little bit of cost of living adjustment, but then if it's just your savings, that's also going to be predicated on the market, and then when you take the money and so on and so forth.
Right. Absolutely. Let's talk about retirement assets, IRAs, and distributions. Lots of clients don't like taking distributions, right?
No, they
so we'll
don't.
say, we'll call them when they're 70 and a half, and we'll say, okay, you now have to take this required distribution from your qualified accounts. And they'll say, well, I don't want to take distribution. I got to pay tax on this.
Yeah.
Number one, why do they have to take that distribution, and what kind of advice can you give those clients to maybe avoid some of those taxes?
The Internal Revenue Service, that's when they force you to take the money out at 70 and a half, and that's a non-negotiable, as I like to say to people too, is that all the years that this is growing for you guys tax deferred, and girls, excuse me, you have to take the money out. It's your, pay to play basically. But the other part too is, when you start taking retirement income is, do you want to have, additional money come in? Maybe it is from that IRA, but if the IRA is part of what funds your retirement, almost, 70, 80% sometimes, as pensions are a thing of the past, that's going to be where, now we got to look at what do we need to bridge that gap that we need to, meet our expenses that we talked about too. So enough to pay the fixed expenses and your variable expenses. That's now going to also be influenced when you take that money maybe prior to 70 and a half.
Another rule of thumb I hear from a lot of investors is, well, at what age, or I guess another question I hear from a lot of investors, what age should I scale back? What age should I get more conservative? And to me, it's not really an age thing. It's more about when you're going to use the money, right?
Yeah. It's not an age thing. It's going to be when you need to use the money. Also, the other thing too is you don't want to take too much risk with your investments, but you also don't want to take not enough risk with your investments. So if you don't want to have your investments maybe get really hit hard like pre-08 or 2008, yeah, you don't want to have 100% your money invested in the stock market. But in such a low interest rate environment as someone in our office calls them certificates of disappointment, you're maybe not going to have enough money, get generated for income purposes at, a CD that gives you 1% for 2 years.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so you really got to kind of have a balance. We always recommend a balanced portfolio. And to me, it's more about when you're going to use the money, not so much what age you are. Because you could be 60 years old and retired, but not use the money until, you're 75 if you don't need it till then. So anyway.
We're also going to be holding a seminar, folks, August 8th at 6 p.m. at the Buffalo Marriott. We're going to talk a lot about these topics and much more. Give us a call at 633-1515 to reserve your spot.
All right, thanks, Ron. Very short break, folks. We'll be right back here on WGRZ on Money Talks.